After 6 years, the billionaire CEO froze at an airport when he saw his missing wife holding triplets. The terminal at JFK International Airport buzzed with its usual symphony of announcements, rolling luggage, and hurried goodbyes. Amidst this controlled chaos, Dominic Westbrook moved with practiced precision, his Italian leather shoes clicking purposefully across the polished floor. At 42, he commanded attention without effort. 6'2" with shoulders that filled his bespoke charcoal suit to perfection, salt and pepper hair cropped close at the sides but just long enough on top to hint at the rebellious boy he'd once been. He was halfway to his gate when the world tilted on its axis. 20 feet away, kneeling beside a row of seats, was a ghost. Vivian, his wife, the woman who had vanished without a trace 6 years ago, taking with her his heart, his future, and their unborn child. Dominic's briefcase slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, the heavy thud lost in the terminal's ambient noise. Blood rushed in his ears as he stared, unable to move, unable to breathe. What froze him completely was what surrounded her. 3 identical children, approximately 5 years old, 2 little girls with matching braids and pink backpacks, and a boy with a toy airplane clutched in his small hand. Triplets, his children. Have you ever had your entire world shattered and rebuilt in a single moment? Have you ever discovered that everything you believed was only half the truth? What would you do if the person who broke your heart had done it to save your life? If the years of grief and anger suddenly collided with joy and confusion? Stay with me to discover how one chance encounter at an airport terminal changed everything for a man who thought he'd lost it all, and a woman who sacrificed everything to protect what mattered most. Hello, my beautiful queens. Life sometimes asks us to make impossible choices, between love and protection, between truth and safety. Today's story speaks to every woman who's ever had to be both the sword and the shield, who's carried burdens in silence because speaking them aloud might bring danger to those she loves. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound act of love looks like walking away, and that time and distance don't diminish the connections that truly matter. As you listen today, I want you to remember that your strength in protecting others is never forgotten, and that sometimes, when we least expect it, life offers us the chance to reclaim what we thought was lost forever. The courage to face that moment, with all its fear, hope, and vulnerability, is what makes us truly unstoppable. As if sensing his presence, Vivian looked up. Their eyes locked across the crowded terminal, and time suspended between them. He saw shock flash across her face, followed by something more complex. Fear, longing, and a fierce protectiveness as her hands instinctively moved to the children's shoulders. "Mommy, my shoe," the little boy said, pointing to his untied lace, oblivious to the earthquake happening in his mother's world. Vivian's lips formed a single word, his name, though no sound reached him through the distance and noise. She looked exactly as she had in his dreams for 6 endless years, only somehow more beautiful, with new lines of character around her eyes that spoke of hardship and resilience. Dominic moved forward as if pulled by an invisible thread, weaving through travelers until he stood before her. Up close, he could see the children clearly. His eyes reflected in the boy's curious gaze, Vivian's gentle smile on both girls' faces. "Vivian," he whispered, her name rusty in his throat after years of avoiding it. "My God, you're alive." She straightened slowly, keeping the children close. "Dominic." Her voice was softer than he remembered, weathered by time and circumstance. I never thought we'd." "Who are you?" one of the little girls interrupted, studying him with unabashed curiosity. "You're wearing a fancy suit like the men in Mommy's magazine." Dominic dropped to one knee, bringing himself to the child's level, his heart thundering so loudly he was certain everyone could hear it. "My name is Dominic," he said, his voice unsteady. "I'm an old friend of your mother's." "He looks like Benjamin," the other girl whispered loudly to her sister. Vivian paled. "Olivia, Emma, Benjamin, please take your backpacks and sit right here while I talk to this gentleman for a moment." She pointed to the seats directly beside them. "But Mommy, we'll miss our plane to Grandma's," Benjamin protested, clutching his toy airplane tighter. We won't miss it, sweetheart. I promise. Vivian's voice was calm, but Dominic could see the slight tremor in her hands as she arranged the children with their backpacks. When she turned back to him, her composure was fragile but holding. Not here, she said quietly. Please. Dominic nodded, still unable to fully process what was happening. 6 years of searching, of private investigators and dead ends, of grief that had hollowed him out and hardened what remained. And here she was, standing before him with 3 children who could only be his. Sisters, have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything in an instant? Share in the comments below. They found a quiet corner in an overpriced airport cafe, the children occupied with chocolate milk and the coloring books Vivian produced from her carry-on. They sat at a table just far enough away that the children couldn't hear their conversation, but close enough that Vivian could watch them with the vigilance Dominic now recognized as a mother's protective instinct. They're beautiful, he said, his eyes moving from the children to her face. How, when? I was already pregnant when I left, Vivian said, her fingers twisting the paper napkin in her lap. I didn't know it was triplets until my 4th month. Why? The question that had haunted him for 6 years emerged as barely more than a breath. Why did you disappear? I searched everywhere. I thought you were dead, Vivian. She looked down at her hands. No wedding ring, he noticed, just a thin tan line where it had once been. I had to leave, she said finally. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Dominic countered, struggling to keep his voice level. You were my wife. We were expecting a child, children. You vanished without a word, without a trace. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Pain flashed across her face. I know what it must have looked like, what you must have thought. But I was trying to protect you. To protect all of us. Protect us from what? Vivian glanced at the children, ensuring they were still absorbed in their coloring. From Richard Blackwood. The name hit Dominic like a physical blow. Richard Blackwood, his former business partner, the man who had tried to steal Westbrook's breakthrough algorithms 6 years ago, who had threatened legal action that could have destroyed everything Dominic had built. What does Blackwood have to do with this? He came to me, Vivian said, her voice dropping even lower, the night before I disappeared. He said he had evidence that could send you to prison, fabricated evidence about data theft, but convincing enough that it would stick. He said he would destroy you unless I convinced you to sign over the patent rights to him. Dominic stared at her, disbelief warring with a dawning horror. Why didn't you tell me? I was going to, but then he showed me the photos. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. He had been having us followed for months. He had pictures of us at doctor's appointments, at dinner, even inside our home. He said if I told you anything, he would make sure neither of us lived to see our baby born. Jesus, Vivian. Dominic ran a hand over his face, memories rearranging themselves in light of this revelation. So you ran. She nodded. I thought if I disappeared, he would leave you alone. Focus on the business rivalry rather than making it personal. I thought I was saving your life and our babies. Babies, Dominic corrected softly, looking over at the triplets. The girls were showing Benjamin how to color inside the lines, their heads bent together in concentration. I didn't know until later, Vivian said, following his gaze. By then, I was living under a different name in a small town in Oregon. I had just enough money from the emergency cash we kept in the safe. I found work as a bookkeeper at a local nursery, had the babies at a county hospital, and built a life for us. Her voice caught. A life without you. For 6 years, Dominic said, the weight of that time pressing on his chest. 6 years, Vivian. Blackwood is gone. He was indicted for securities fraud 3 years ago. He's in federal prison. You could have come back. By then, I was afraid you had moved on, she admitted. The children were settled. I saw your picture in magazines, read about your success. You seemed whole without us. Whole? Dominic's laugh was hollow. I was a shell. I poured everything into the company because it was the only thing that didn't remind me of you. I stopped going home. Sold the brownstone because I couldn't walk through those rooms anymore. I hired private investigators who found nothing. I offered rewards that brought nothing but false leads and heartbreak. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Dominic. I thought I was doing the right thing. And now? Why are you here at JFK? Where are you going? Florida, she said. My mother had a stroke last week. The children have never met her. I thought it might be their only chance. Dominic absorbed this, his mind racing. Eleanor Winters had never approved of him, had thought her daughter was marrying beneath her despite his early success. The irony that Vivian was now taking their children to see the woman who had once told him he would never provide adequately for a family was not lost on him. They don't know about me, he said. It wasn't a question. They know they have a father, Vivian corrected gently. I've told them stories about you, about how brilliant and kind you are, how you're changing the world with your work. They have a photo of us from our honeymoon by their beds. They call you Daddy in the picture. Something broke open inside Dominic's chest, grief and longing and a fierce, unexpected joy all at once. I want to know them, Vivian. They're my children too. Before she could respond, Benjamin appeared at her elbow, his toy airplane clutched tightly in one hand. Mommy, Emma says we're going to miss our plane, he said, his small face serious. Then he turned to Dominic, studying him with unabashed curiosity. You look like me, or I look like you. Mommy says I have my daddy's eyes. Dominic's throat tightened as he met his son's gaze, his own eyes looking back at him from a face that held Vivian's gentle features. You do, he managed. You have exactly your daddy's eyes. Benjamin considered this. Are you my daddy? The one in the picture. The simple question hung in the air between them. Dominic looked at Vivian, silently asking permission. After a moment that felt like eternity, she nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Yes, Dominic said, his voice breaking. I'm your daddy. Benjamin's eyes widened. Without hesitation, he thrust his toy airplane toward Dominic. Do you want to play? I'm going to be a pilot when I grow up. Dominic took the offered toy with trembling hands. I would love to play, he said. And being a pilot sounds like a wonderful plan. The commotion drew the girls' attention. They approached cautiously, standing on either side of their brother. Girls, Vivian said softly. This is your father. This is your daddy. Emma, the more outspoken of the twins, stepped forward. For real? Not just in the picture. For real, Dominic confirmed, his heart so full it threatened to burst. I've been looking for you for a very long time. Did you get lost? Olivia asked, her voice smaller than her sister's. The innocent question nearly undid him. Something like that, he managed. But I'm not lost anymore. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and explanations simplified for 5-year-old understanding. The children accepted the revelation with the remarkable adaptability of the young. Asking practical questions about where he lived and whether he had a dog, he didn't, but promised to consider it, rather than dwelling on the years of absence. As their flight time approached, reality intruded on the miracle. Vivian began gathering their things, her movements betraying her uncertainty. Don't go, Dominic said quietly while the children were distracted by a passing service dog. Or let me come with you. I'll buy a ticket on your flight. We can figure this out together. Dominic, Vivian began, her expression torn. It's not that simple. The children have school. I have work. We have a life. A life I want to be part of, he interrupted. I've missed 5 years, Vivian. I won't miss another day. She studied his face, searching for something. What about your meeting in San Francisco? The acquisition you've been working toward for months. Dominic blinked, momentarily surprised that she knew about the Meridian deal. Then he remembered, she had always followed his career, even from afar. It doesn't matter, he said, and meant it. None of it matters compared to this. Vivian's expression softened. You've worked so hard to build Westbrook. I won't ask you to walk away from that. I'm not walking away from the company, Dominic clarified, but I am choosing what matters most. The deal will happen with or without me in the room tomorrow. My family won't. Family. The word hung between them, powerful and fragile all at once. 1 week, Vivian said finally. Come with us to Florida for 1 week. Let the children get to know you. Let us figure out what happens next. 1 week, Dominic agreed, already pulling out his phone to cancel his original flight and book a seat on theirs. It's a start. As they boarded the plane to Tampa, the children excitedly arguing over who would sit next to their newly discovered father, Dominic felt something he hadn't experienced in 6 years. Hope, not the cautious optimism he projected in boardrooms, but genuine hope that warmed him from within. Seated beside Benjamin, with Emma and Olivia across the aisle with their mother, Dominic watched as his son meticulously fastened his seatbelt, his small face serious with concentration. You have to click it until it makes the sound, Benjamin instructed, demonstrating with exaggerated care. That's how you know it's safe. Thank you for teaching me, Dominic said solemnly, following the boy's example. Benjamin nodded, satisfied with his student's performance. Then, with the directness only children possess, he asked, Are you going to live with us now? In our house with the blue door? Dominic glanced at Vivian, who was helping Olivia arrange her stuffed animals for takeoff. I don't know yet, buddy. Your mom and I have a lot to talk about. But you want to, Benjamin pressed. Right? More than anything, Dominic admitted. The boy considered this, then reached over and patted Dominic's hand with surprising gentleness. It's okay if you're scared. Mommy says everyone gets scared sometimes, even grown-ups. But you don't have to be scared of us. We're really good kids. Mommy says so all the time. Dominic's throat tightened with emotion. I believe her. And I'm not scared of you, Benjamin. I'm just overwhelmed. Do you know what that means? Benjamin nodded seriously. It's like when you have so many feelings they don't all fit inside you at once. That's exactly right, Dominic said, amazed by the child's intuition. I have a lot of feelings right now. Me too, Benjamin confided. I always wanted a dad. The other kids at school have them. They come to baseball games and build things. He looked up hopefully. Do you build things? I do, Dominic said. I build software, computer programs that help doctors see inside people's bodies to make them better. But I also used to build model airplanes when I was about your age. Benjamin's eyes widened. Real flying ones? Real flying ones, Dominic confirmed. Maybe we could build one together sometime. Today, Benjamin asked eagerly. Dominic laughed. A genuine laugh that felt foreign in his throat after so many years. Maybe not today, but soon. As the plane taxied down the runway, Dominic caught Vivian's eye across the aisle. She was watching them, her expression a complex mixture of emotions he couldn't fully decipher. But beneath the caution, he saw something that might have been hope. The plane lifted into the air, carrying them toward a future none of them could have imagined that morning. 6 years earlier, Dominic had stood in the doorway of their brownstone's master bedroom, staring at the empty closet where Vivian's clothes should have been. Her jewelry box sat open on the dresser, emptied of the pieces he'd given her over their 4 years together. No note, no explanation, just gone. Sir, the police detective's voice pulled him from the memory. Is there anyone who might want to harm your wife? Any threats? Any enemies? Dominic had laughed then, a harsh sound that scraped his throat raw. I'm a tech CEO. I have competitors, not enemies. But that wasn't entirely true. Richard Blackwood had been more than a competitor. They'd started Westbrook Technologies together in Dominic's garage, two brilliant programmers with complementary skills. Dominic was the visionary, the algorithm architect. Blackwood was the business mind, the one who knew how to package and sell their innovations. Until the medical imaging breakthrough. Dominic had spent 3 years developing an algorithm that could detect microscopic anomalies in tissue scans that human eyes would miss. It would revolutionize early cancer detection, saving countless lives. But when the first major hospital system had offered to license the technology, Blackwood had wanted to sell it outright for a quick profit. You're thinking too small, Dominic had told him during their final argument. This isn't about money. This is about changing medicine forever. The next day, Blackwood had tried to access the source code, planning to take it to a competitor. Dominic caught him, fired him, and bought out his shares in a contentious settlement. 2 weeks later, Vivian disappeared. Now, as the plane began its descent into Tampa, Dominic wondered how he could have been so blind. Blackwood hadn't just been after the company. He'd gone after Dominic's entire life. "Daddy, look!" Benjamin's excited voice pulled him from the dark memory. The boy pointed out the window at the sprawling coastline below. "Is that the ocean?" "That's Tampa Bay," Dominic explained, grateful for the interruption. "The Gulf of Mexico is just beyond it. Can we go swimming?" "Mommy said Grandma's house is near the beach." "If your mom says it's okay," Dominic replied, glancing across the aisle where Vivian was helping Emma gather her colored pencils. She met his eyes briefly. "Maybe tomorrow. Today we need to get settled and see how Grandma is feeling." The mention of Eleanor Winters sent a chill through Dominic. His last interaction with Vivian's mother had been at their wedding, where she'd cornered him during the reception. "My daughter could have married anyone," she'd said, champagne glass clutched tightly in her manicured hand. "Doctors, lawyers, men from good families. Instead, she chose a garage startup founder with delusions of grandeur." "I love her," Dominic had replied simply, "and I'll spend my life making her happy." Eleanor had smiled thinly. "We'll see." Now he was about to face her again, not as the struggling entrepreneur she'd dismissed, but as the billionaire CEO whose wife had fled from him, taking his children with her. He couldn't imagine she'd be any more welcoming. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, and the children cheered as if they'd accomplished something remarkable. Dominic found himself smiling at their enthusiasm, a lightness in his chest that had been absent for years. As they made their way through the terminal, he noticed how efficiently Vivian managed the children, keeping them close without hovering, answering their rapid-fire questions with patient clarity. She'd become a remarkable mother in his absence, building a family without him. The thought brought a fresh wave of grief, not just for what he'd missed, but for what she'd endured alone. "We can take a taxi," Vivian said as they approached the ground transportation area. "Mom's house is about 40 minutes from here." "I'll arrange a car," Dominic replied, already reaching for his phone. "More comfortable for everyone." Vivian hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." While they waited for the car, Emma sidled up to Dominic, studying him with unabashed curiosity. Unlike her more cautious sister, Emma seemed determined to make up for lost time. "Do you have a big house?" she asked. "Mommy says you help sick people with your computers." "I do have a house in New York," Dominic answered. "And yes, the technology my company makes helps doctors find illnesses so they can treat people sooner. Like when Olivia had strep throat and the doctor looked in her mouth with that light thing?" Dominic smiled. "A bit more complicated than that, but similar idea." "Are you rich?" Emma pressed, ignoring her mother's quiet, "Emma, that's not polite." "I've been fortunate in business," Dominic said carefully. "But that's not what's important." "What is important?" Emma's directness was disarming. Dominic looked at the 3 children, his children, then at Vivian, who watched him with guarded eyes. "Family," he said simply. "Family is what matters most." The black SUV arrived, and the driver loaded their luggage while Dominic helped the children into their seats. It struck him how natural it felt, this sudden shift into fatherhood. Terrifying, yes, but also right in a way nothing had felt since Vivian left. As they drove through Tampa toward the coastal community where Eleanor lived, Dominic found himself cataloging details about his children with hungry attention. Olivia was the quieter twin, thoughtful and observant, clutching a well-worn stuffed rabbit. Emma was bold and curious, constantly pointing out sights along the road. And Benjamin, his son, had Dominic's analytical mind, asking detailed questions about how the car's navigation system worked. "They're extraordinary," he said quietly to Vivian, who sat beside him while the children pressed their faces to the windows. "They are," she agreed, a hint of pride warming her voice. "They've been through a lot, but they're resilient." "Like their mother," Dominic observed. Vivian's eyes met his, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. "I did what I had to do. I know that now, he said. But Vivian, if you had told me about Blackwood's threats, you would have confronted him, she interrupted. And he would have followed through. You never back down, Dominic. It's what makes you brilliant in business and terrifying as a target. Before he could respond, the car turned onto a palm-lined street of elegant homes overlooking the water. They pulled up to a sprawling Mediterranean-style house with terracotta roof tiles and bougainvillea climbing the walls. Grandma's house, the children chorused, already unbuckling their seatbelts. Dominic felt a knot form in his stomach. Does she know I'm coming? I called from the airport while you were getting the bags, Vivian admitted. She was surprised. I bet, Dominic muttered. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a slender woman in her 60s leaning on a walker. Eleanor Winters had aged since Dominic last saw her. Her once dark hair now silver, her posture slightly stooped. But her eyes, Vivian's eyes, were as sharp as ever as they fixed on him. Grandma! The children rushed forward, surrounding her with gentle hugs that suggested they'd been warned about her condition. My darlings, Eleanor said, her voice warm as she bent to kiss each small head. Then she straightened, her expression cooling as she addressed Dominic. Mr. Westbrook, this is unexpected. Mrs. Winters, he replied with a nod. I hope you're recovering well. Well enough to recognize a complication when I see one, she said dryly. Then to Vivian, let's get everyone settled. The children must be tired from traveling. As they entered the house, Dominic felt like an intruder in a world that had formed without him. A world where his children called this woman grandma and knew nothing of his own parents, both gone before Vivian disappeared. The house was exactly what he would have expected from Eleanor. Tastefully decorated in coastal blues and whites, expensive without being ostentatious. The children clearly knew their way around, immediately heading for a sunroom overlooking the beach where toys were already arranged. They can play while we talk, Eleanor said, leading them to a formal living room. Vivian has explained some of the situation, but I think I deserve the full story. Dominic glanced at Vivian, who nodded slightly. Together, they recounted the morning's encounter at JFK and the revelations that followed. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression unreadable as Vivian explained Blackwood's threats and her decision to disappear. When they finished, Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her fingers tapping thoughtfully on the arm of her chair. Finally, she turned to Dominic. So, she said, you had no idea my daughter was protecting you all these years? None, Dominic confirmed. I thought. He stopped, the old pain rising in his throat. You thought she'd abandoned you, Eleanor finished for him. Left you for someone else, perhaps. Or simply grown tired of being a tech entrepreneur's wife. Mom, Vivian warned. Eleanor held up a hand. I'm not judging, Vivian. I'm establishing facts. She turned back to Dominic. And now you've discovered not only that your wife is alive, but that you have 3 children you never knew existed. What exactly are your intentions? The bluntness of the question caught him off guard. My intentions? Yes, Mr. Westbrook. You've inserted yourself into a family that has functioned without you for 6 years. Are you planning to disrupt their lives permanently? Or is this merely curiosity that will fade once the novelty wears off? Mom! Vivian's voice was sharp now. That's enough. But Dominic held up a hand. It's a fair question, he said, meeting Eleanor's challenging gaze. My intention is to be a father to my children. How that looks, whether Vivian and I can rebuild what we lost, whether we co-parent separately, that's something we need to figure out. But I'm not going anywhere. Eleanor studied him, her expression softening slightly. You've changed, she observed. The young man who married my daughter was brilliant but reckless. You seem steadier now. Losing Vivian changed me, Dominic said simply. Nothing seemed important after she disappeared. I built the company because it was all I had left. Something shifted in Eleanor's eyes, not quite approval, but perhaps a reluctant respect. Well, she said, rising carefully with her walker. I suppose we'll see what the week brings. The guest rooms are prepared. Vivian can show you where everything is. As Eleanor made her way slowly toward the sunroom to see the children, Vivian turned to Dominic with an apologetic expression. She's always been protective, even more so since I failed to protect you from Blackwood, Dominic finished quietly. That's not what I was going to say, Vivian protested. But it's true. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture from their past that made Vivian's expression soften with recognition. I was so focused on the company, on proving myself, that I didn't see the danger until it was too late. You couldn't have known, Vivian said. Blackwood was careful. He approached me when you were in Boston for that conference. He had everything planned. Dominic remembered that trip, 3 days of meetings with hospital administrators interested in the imaging software. He called Vivian each night, excited about the potential partnerships. Had she already been planning her escape then? Had she been saying goodbye without him realizing it? I looked for you, he said, the words emerging more roughly than he intended. For years, I hired the best private investigators. I offered rewards. I followed every lead, no matter how unlikely. I know, Vivian said softly. I saw the news stories. That's why I stayed away even after Blackwood went to prison. I thought you'd be safer if I remained gone. Safer, Dominic echoed, confused. Blackwood had friends, powerful ones. I was afraid they might come after us if I resurfaced. She hesitated. And then, as more time passed, it seemed kinder to let you move on with your life. There was no moving on, Dominic said, his voice low and intense. There was just existing, working, building something that felt hollow without you to share it. The raw honesty in his voice made Vivian look away, blinking rapidly. I should check on the children, she said, and show you to your room. You must be tired. Dominic recognized the deflection, her way of retreating when emotions ran too high. It was so familiar, this dance between them, even after 6 years apart. Of course, he said, allowing her the space she needed. Lead the way. The guest room was on the 2nd floor, with a balcony overlooking the Gulf. As Vivian showed him where to find extra towels and explained the house's quirks, the temperamental air conditioning, the Wi-Fi password, Dominic was struck by the domesticity of the moment. How many times had they done this in their marriage, settling into hotel rooms on business trips or visiting friends? The children are down the hall, Vivian explained. They're sharing the blue room. I'm across from them. Thank you, Dominic said, for letting me come, for giving me this chance. Vivian paused at the door. They deserve to know their father, she said simply. And you deserve to know them. And us? The question slipped out before he could stop it. What do we deserve, Vivian? She met his eyes, something vulnerable and uncertain in her gaze. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought we'd have the chance to find out. Before he could respond, Benjamin's voice called from downstairs. Mommy, Daddy, Grandma says we can have cookies. Daddy. The word sent a jolt through Dominic's chest. Joy and grief tangled together. Coming, sweetheart, Vivian called back. She gave Dominic a small smile. Duty calls. As she turned to go, Dominic caught her hand. Vivian, he said softly, whatever happens between us, thank you for them, for raising them to be so perfect. Her fingers tightened briefly around his, the first voluntary touch since their reunion. They are pretty amazing, aren't they? Just like their mother, Dominic said. A flush colored Vivian's cheeks as she slipped her hand from his and headed downstairs. Dominic followed, his heart lighter than it had been in 6 years. My queens, have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? Tag a sister who showed that kind of strength. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity as the children, excited by both their father's presence and their grandmother's indulgence, led Dominic on a tour of the house and grounds. They showed him the beach access path, the treehouse in the backyard that needed fixing because Grandma can't climb anymore, and their favorite hiding spots. Dominic absorbed it all with hungry attention, filing away each detail about his children's lives. Emma loved drawing and could spend hours with her sketchbook. Olivia was the reader, already devouring chapter books meant for older children. Benjamin had an engineer's mind, constantly taking things apart to see how they worked. "He's exactly like you," Vivian said quietly as they watched Benjamin methodically disassemble and reassemble a toy car on the patio. "Remember how you took apart our coffee maker the week after we got married? And made it brew twice as fast," Dominic recalled with a smile. "And nearly burned down the kitchen," Vivian countered, but she was smiling too, the memory warming the space between them. These moments, these glimpses of their shared past, felt like stepping stones across a vast river. Each one brought them a little closer, a little more connected, though the current of 6 years' separation still rushed beneath their feet. Dinner was a lively affair, with the children eager to share every detail of their lives with their newly discovered father. Dominic learned about their school in Oregon, their friends, their favorite foods and games. Each revelation was precious, a piece of the puzzle of who his children were. Eleanor watched the interactions with sharp eyes, her initial frostiness thawing slightly as she observed Dominic's genuine interest in the children. When Benjamin proudly showed off his ability to cut his own chicken, Dominic praised him with such obvious pride that even Eleanor's lips curved in a reluctant smile. After dinner, as the sun set over the Gulf in a spectacular display of orange and pink, the children begged to walk on the beach. Eleanor excused herself to rest, leaving Dominic and Vivian to shepherd the excited trio down the wooden walkway to the shore. The beach was nearly empty, just a few couples strolling in the distance. The children ran ahead, chasing waves and collecting shells, their laughter carrying on the salt-tinged breeze. Dominic and Vivian walked side by side, close but not touching, the space between them filled with unspoken words. The setting sun painted Vivian's profile in gold, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheek, the strength in her jawline that he'd always admired. "They've never had this before," Vivian said softly, watching as Benjamin showed his sisters how to skip shells across a tidal pool. "A family walk on the beach. Both parents. What have you told them about me?" Dominic asked. "About why I wasn't there?" Vivian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture he remembered from their early days together. "I told them their daddy was a brilliant man who helped sick people with his inventions, that he couldn't be with us, but that he would be proud of them." "I am," Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. "So proud. You've done an incredible job with them, Vivian." "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "The pregnancy was difficult. Triplets usually are. I was on bed rest for the last 2 months. The delivery was complicated." Dominic's heart clenched at the thought of her going through that alone. "Were you afraid?" "Terrified," she said simply. "But I had no choice but to be strong. For them." "You shouldn't have had to do it alone," Dominic said, the words emerging more forcefully than he intended. "I should have been there." Vivian stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The dying sunlight caught in her eyes, turning them to amber. "I made that choice, Dominic. I chose to leave, to keep you safe, to have our babies away from Blackwood's reach. I won't apologize for protecting our family, even if it meant breaking both our hearts." The fierce certainty in her voice, the mama bear protecting her cubs, took his breath away. This was a Vivian he hadn't known before, tempered by hardship and solitary strength. "I'm not asking for an apology," he said quietly. "I'm trying to understand what you went through, what I missed." Her expression softened. "So much." Their first words, Benjamin said, "Book first," then Emma with more, and Olivia surprised us all with butterfly. Their first steps, first teeth, first everything. She looked out at the children, now building a rudimentary sand castle. "But you're here now. That's what matters to them. And to you," Dominic asked, unable to stop himself. "Does it matter to you that I'm here?" Vivian's gaze returned to his face, searching. "It's complicated. For 6 years, you've been both a memory and a ghost. The man I loved and lost. The father my children would never know. And now you're here, in the flesh, successful beyond what even you dreamed. And She broke off, shaking her head. I don't know how to reconcile the past with the present. We have time, Dominic said gently. One day at a time. A small smile touched her lips. 1 week, you mean? That was our agreement. A starting point, Dominic clarified. Not an ending. Before she could respond, Benjamin came running up, his small face alight with excitement. Daddy, we found a crab. Come see. Dominic allowed himself to be pulled toward the impromptu sand castle, now apparently home to a small hermit crab that the children had discovered. As he knelt beside them, explaining how the crab carried its home on its back, he felt Vivian's gaze on him, thoughtful, evaluating, perhaps even hopeful. Later, after the children had been bathed and tucked into bed with stories, Dominic reading to Benjamin while Vivian handled the girls' more elaborate bedtime routine, they found themselves alone on the balcony outside his room. The night was warm, the sky clear and scattered with stars, the rhythmic sound of waves breaking on the shore below them. They didn't want to let you go, Vivian observed, leaning against the railing. Benjamin made me promise you'd still be here in the morning. I will be, Dominic assured her. Every morning, for as long as they need me. Vivian studied him in the moonlight. You've changed, she said, echoing her mother's earlier observation. The Dominic I knew was driven, focused on the future, on building something revolutionary. This version of you seems more present, Dominic suggested. Grounded. Both, she agreed. What happened? Dominic looked out at the dark expanse of the Gulf, gathering his thoughts. After you disappeared, I was lost. The police investigation went nowhere. The private investigators found nothing. It was like you'd vanished into thin air. He paused, the memory still painful. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense. The only place where I still had control. The company flourished, Vivian noted. The company became everything, Dominic corrected. I worked 18-hour days, slept in my office more often than not, pushed the team relentlessly. We went from a promising startup to industry leader in 3 years. I saw, Vivian said quietly, your face on the cover of Forbes, the profiles in the Wall Street Journal, the hospital partnerships. Dominic turned to her, surprised. You followed my career? A flush colored her cheeks, visible even in the moonlight. I needed to know you were okay, that the sacrifice was worth it. It wasn't, Dominic said bluntly. None of it was worth losing you. The success, the money, the recognition, it all felt hollow. I built an empire on the ashes of what mattered most. Vivian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never wanted to hurt you. I know that now, Dominic said. But Vivian, why didn't you come back after Blackwood went to prison? The threat was gone. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller, more vulnerable. By then, the children were 3. We had a life in Oregon. A small house, my job at the nursery that had become a design business when the owner saw my sketches for the garden layouts. The kids had friends, a routine. She hesitated. And I was afraid. Of what? That you'd hate me for what I'd done. That you'd fight me for custody. That you'd moved on with someone else. The last fear emerged as barely more than a whisper. There was never anyone else, Dominic said, the words emerging with quiet intensity. How could there be? You took my heart with you when you left. The simple truth hung in the air between them, as tangible as the salt spray rising from the waves below. Vivian drew a shaky breath. We should get some rest, she said, clearly retreating from the emotional precipice. The children will be up at dawn, and they'll want every minute with you. Dominic nodded, recognizing her need for space. Good night, Vivian. As she turned to go, she paused, looking back at him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. I'm glad they found you, she said softly. They deserve to know the man their father is. And who is that man? Dominic asked, genuinely curious about how she saw him now. A small smile touched her lips. I'm still figuring that out, but I like what I've seen so far. With that, she slipped away, leaving Dominic alone with the stars and the sound of the waves. his heart lighter than it had been in 6 years. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the Florida sunshine streaming through the windows as Dominic was awakened by an enthusiastic Benjamin bouncing onto his bed. "Daddy, wake up. Grandma's making pancakes and we're going to the beach, and you promised to help me build a sand castle bigger than me." Dominic blinked awake, momentarily disoriented until his son's eager face came into focus. His son. The reality of it still stunned him. "Good morning to you too, buddy," he said, sitting up and ruffling Benjamin's hair. "What time is it?" 7:32. Benjamin reported precisely. "I can tell time now. Mommy taught me." "That's very impressive," Dominic said, genuinely proud. "Give me 10 minutes to shower and I'll be right down. Okay?" Benjamin nodded seriously. "I'll time you," he declared, studying the watch on his small wrist with great concentration. As Dominic showered and dressed, he could hear the household coming to life below. Children's laughter, the clatter of dishes, Eleanor's voice instructing someone about the proper way to set the table. It was a symphony of family life that he'd never experienced, having grown up as an only child with reserved, academic parents. When he came downstairs, he found a domestic scene that both warmed and pained him. Vivian at the stove flipping pancakes, Eleanor supervising the twins as they arranged fruit on a platter, Benjamin carefully counting out forks at each place setting. This was what he had missed, what should have been his daily reality for the past 6 years. "Right on time," Benjamin announced, checking his watch. 9 minutes and 43 seconds. "Very efficient," Eleanor commented, raising an eyebrow at Dominic. "A quality I wouldn't have associated with you in the past." "Mom," Vivian warned, but Dominic just smiled. "I've learned the value of time, Mrs. Winters," he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Vivian with a grateful nod. "Especially time with family." Something in his tone must have reached Eleanor, because her expression softened slightly. "Well, the pancakes are getting cold. Everyone sit." Breakfast was a lively affair, with the children chattering about their plans for the day. The beach was the unanimous priority, with specific requests for sandcastle building, shell collecting, and swimming, if Mommy says the water isn't too cold. "I have some work calls I need to make first," Dominic said, glancing at Vivian. "The acquisition I was heading to San Francisco for. I need to check in with my team." "Of course," Vivian said. "Take whatever time you need. We'll get the beach things ready." After breakfast, Dominic retreated to his room to call Vanessa, his COO, who had been handling the Meridian negotiations in his absence. "Where the hell are you?" she demanded without preamble. "The Meridian board is getting nervous. They want to know why you're suddenly unavailable for the biggest deal of the year." "I'm in Florida," Dominic said, moving to the balcony where he could see the children helping Vivian gather beach toys in the yard below. Something personal came up. "Personal?" Vanessa repeated skeptically. "You don't do personal, Dominic. You haven't taken a vacation in 6 years." "Things change," he said, watching as Benjamin demonstrated what appeared to be a sand castle technique to his sisters, his small hands gesturing animatedly. "I found Vivian." Silence on the line. Then, "Your wife? The one who disappeared?" "Yes." The simple word couldn't begin to encompass the magnitude of what had happened. "Is she okay?" Vanessa asked carefully. "She's alive and well," Dominic confirmed. "And I have children, Vanessa. Triplets. 2 girls and a boy." Another stunned silence. "Jesus, Dominic. I don't even know what to say." "Neither did I when I first saw them yesterday," Dominic admitted. "But I'm staying here for the week. I need to get to know them, to understand what happened." "Of course," Vanessa said, her tone softening. "The Meridian deal can wait. Or I can handle the final negotiations if you trust me with it." "I do," Dominic said without hesitation. "You know the terms we want. Make it happen." "Consider it done," Vanessa assured him. "And Dominic, I'm happy for you. After everything you've been through, you deserve this." As he ended the call, Dominic realized it was the first time in years that he'd put someone, a head of Westbrook Technologies. The company had been his life raft after Vivian disappeared, the only thing keeping him afloat in a sea of grief and unanswered questions. Now, watching his children play in the sunshine below, he understood how narrow his existence had become. He made one more call to his lawyer, instructing him to set up trust funds for each of the children and to prepare paperwork acknowledging his paternity. Whatever happened between him and Vivian, he was determined to secure his children's future and his place in their lives. When he joined the family on the beach an hour later, he found the children already hard at work on an elaborate sandcastle system. Benjamin had sketched a design in the sand, surprisingly detailed for a 5-year-old, and was directing his sisters in the construction. "Daddy," Emma called, waving enthusiastically. "Come help. I'm making the moat, but it keeps falling in." Dominic dropped to his knees beside her, showing her how to pack the sand more firmly. "Like this," he demonstrated. "You want it solid enough to hold its shape when the water comes in." Emma watched with serious concentration, then mimicked his technique perfectly. "You're good at this," she declared. "Did you build sand castles when you were little?" "Not many," Dominic admitted. "I grew up in Chicago, far from the ocean, but I built a lot of snow forts in the winter." "What's snow like?" Olivia asked, looking up from her careful arrangement of shells along the castle walls. "We saw pictures in books, but Mommy says it doesn't snow where we live in Oregon. It's cold and wet and magical," Dominic told her. "It makes everything quiet, and when the sun hits it just right, it sparkles like millions of tiny diamonds." "Can we see it sometime?" Benjamin asked hopefully. "I'd like that," Dominic said, his heart swelling at the thought of future seasons with his children. Building snowmen, decorating Christmas trees, celebrating birthdays, all the milestones he'd missed and all the ones still to come. He glanced up to find Vivian watching them from her beach chair, a wistful expression on her face. She wore a simple navy swimsuit under a gauzy white cover-up, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking younger and more relaxed than she had yesterday. "You should join us," he called to her. "Benjamin has quite the architectural vision here." "I'm the supervisor," she replied with a smile. "Someone has to document the construction process." She held up her phone, and Dominic realized she'd been taking photos of them working together. "Will you send those to me?" he asked. "I'd like to have pictures of the kids." Something softened in Vivian's expression. "Of course, I have thousands from birth until now. You should see them all." The offer, this willingness to share the years he'd missed, felt like the first real step toward healing the chasm between them. The morning passed in a blur of sand castle construction, shell hunting, and wading in the surprisingly warm Gulf waters. Dominic found himself laughing more than he had in years, delighting in his children's discoveries and their uninhibited joy in having both parents with them. After lunch on the patio, with the children drowsy from sun and activity, Eleanor suggested a rest time. "The little ones need to recharge," she said firmly. "And I suspect you two could use some adult conversation without interruption." As the children were settled with books and quiet activities in their room, Vivian suggested a walk. "There's a nature preserve just down the beach," she said. "It's beautiful this time of year." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the tension of yesterday softened by the morning's shared experiences with the children. The preserve was as beautiful as Vivian had promised, a winding path through coastal forest that opened occasionally to stunning views of the Gulf. "I've been thinking about what happens after this week," Dominic said finally, as they paused at an overlook, "about how we make this work for the children." Vivian leaned against the wooden railing, her profile outlined against the blue expanse of water. "And what have you concluded?" "That I want to be part of their daily lives," Dominic said simply. "Not just weekends or holidays or video calls. I want to be there for homework and scraped knees and bedtime stories." "That would mean significant changes," Vivian pointed out. "Either you relocating to Oregon or us moving to New York." "I can work from anywhere," Dominic said. "The company is established enough now that I don't need to be in the office every day." Or, he hesitated, then pressed on. "Or we could start fresh somewhere new. All of us." Vivian turned to face him fully, her expression guarded. "What exactly are you suggesting, Dominic?" "I'm suggesting that we give our family a chance," he said, taking a step toward her. "Not just co-parenting, but rebuilding what we had, what we lost. We can't just pick up where we left off," Vivian said, her voice gentle but firm. "Too much has happened. We're different people now." "I know that," Dominic acknowledged. "I'm not asking for the past back. I'm asking for a chance at a new future. One where we build something together, with our eyes wide open this time." Vivian looked away, her gaze returning to the water. "When I left," she said slowly, "I was 28 years old, married to a brilliant, driven man who was going to change the world. I believed in you completely, but I also felt secondary. Your work always came first." The observation stung, but Dominic couldn't deny its truth. "And now I'm 34, a mother of 3 who built a life from nothing. I run my own landscape design business. I've learned to be self-sufficient, to make decisions without consulting anyone else." She turned back to him, her expression resolute. "I won't go back to being an afterthought in your life, Dominic." "You never were," he protested. "But I understand how it felt that way. I was obsessed with proving myself, with making Westbrook a success." He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Losing you changed everything. Success meant nothing without you to share it with." Something vulnerable flickered in Vivian's expression. "And if we tried again? How do I know the company wouldn't become your priority once more?" "Because I've lived that life," Dominic said simply. "I've reached every goal I set, built the company bigger than I ever imagined. And it left me empty." He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "These past 24 hours with you and the children have brought me more joy than the last 6 years combined." Vivian looked down at their joined hands, her thumb unconsciously tracing the familiar callus on his palm. A writer's bump from years of coding. "It's not just about us," she said quietly. "The children have to come first. Their stability, their happiness." "Always," Dominic agreed. "Which is why I want us to take this slowly, to be thoughtful about every step." A small smile touched Vivian's lips. "Slowly and thoughtful weren't exactly your specialties before." "I've had 6 years to learn patience," Dominic said, returning her smile. "And the value of what really matters." Before Vivian could respond, her phone chimed with a text message. She pulled it from her pocket, frowning slightly as she read the screen. "Everything okay?" Dominic asked. "It's Mom," Vivian said. "The children are awake and asking for us. We should head back." As they turned to retrace their steps along the path, Dominic kept hold of her hand. To his surprise and quiet joy, Vivian let him. Their fingers intertwined as they walked in companionable silence. The rest of the day passed in a pleasant rhythm of family activities, a puzzle with the children, helping Eleanor prepare dinner, an impromptu dance party in the living room when Emma discovered her grandmother's old record collection. Through it all, Dominic observed the easy way Vivian managed their family life, her natural grace as a mother, the quiet strength that had allowed her to build this life alone. That night, after the children were asleep, Dominic found himself once again on the balcony outside his room. The night was cooler than before, a gentle breeze coming off the water. He was scrolling through the photos Vivian had sent to his phone, hundreds of images documenting his children's lives from birth until now. Tiny newborns in the hospital, their faces scrunched and red. First smiles, first steps, birthday parties with homemade cakes, Halloween costumes, Benjamin as an astronaut, the girls as matching butterflies, Christmas mornings around a small tree, first day of preschool with matching lunchboxes. Each image was a moment he'd missed, a piece of his children's history that he could observe but never truly experience. The loss felt physical, an ache in his chest that no amount of future memories could fully heal. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" Vivian's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in simple cotton pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger than she had in the harsh airport lighting where he'd first seen her again. "Yes," Dominic admitted, making room for her on the lounge chair where he sat. I keep thinking about all the moments I missed, all the times they needed a father and I wasn't there. Vivian settled beside him, close enough that he could smell the faint lavender of her shampoo. They always knew they had a father who would have loved them if he could, she said softly. I made sure of that. Thank you for that, Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion, for keeping me alive in their hearts. They sat in silence for a moment, looking at the photos together. Dominic paused on an image of the triplets at about 3 years old, sitting on a porch step with gap-toothed smiles. That was our little house in Oregon, Vivian explained. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a tiny yard, but it was ours. Tell me about your life there, Dominic requested. I want to know everything. Vivian leaned back, gathering her thoughts. The first year was the hardest, she admitted. 3 newborns, no support system, constant fear that Blackwood would somehow find us. I was exhausted all the time. There were days I barely managed to feed them and keep them clean. Dominic's heart clenched at the image of Vivian struggling alone with 3 infants while he was throwing himself into work 3,000 miles away. How did you manage? He asked. 1 day at a time, Vivian said simply. I found a mother's group at the local library, made a few friends who helped with babysitting, got a part-time job at Evergreen Nursery when the triplets were 18 months old. They had an on-site daycare for employees. And your design business? A smile touched her lips. That started by accident. The owner, Marion, saw me sketching ideas for the display gardens during my lunch break. She asked if I'd help redesign the entrance area. Customers loved it, started asking who had done it. Within a year, I was doing residential consultations on the side. By the time the kids were 4, I had my own client list and was working for the nursery only part-time. Pride warmed Dominic's chest. You built something beautiful from nothing. I had to, Vivian said, her voice strengthening, for them. And for me. I couldn't just be a woman in hiding, a mother defined by what she'd lost. I needed to create something new. You always were the creative one, Dominic observed. I remember how you transformed our first apartment, that terrible walk-up with the leaky windows. You made it feel like home with just paint and fabric, and those plants you insisted would thrive despite the lack of sunlight. And they did, Vivian reminded him with a smile. Except for that fern you accidentally drowned when I was visiting my mother. I still maintain it was suicidal, Dominic protested, returning her smile. No plant needs that much water. The shared memory hung between them, warm and familiar. For a moment, it was easy to forget the 6 years of separation, the pain and loss that had shaped them both. I missed this, Vivian admitted quietly, talking with you, laughing about nothing. It was always so easy between us, until I let work consume me, Dominic finished for her. Until Blackwood saw an opportunity to exploit the distance I'd created. Vivian nodded, her expression turning serious. I don't blame you for what happened, Dominic. Blackwood was the villain in our story, not you. But I need you to understand that I can't go back to being the wife who waits at home while you change the world. I've built my own world now. I don't want you to go back, Dominic said, reaching for her hand. I want us to go forward together, as equals, partners in every sense. Vivian studied their joined hands, her expression thoughtful. It won't be simple, she warned. The logistics alone, my business, your company, the children's school and friends. Nothing worth having is simple, Dominic countered. But we're both problem solvers. We can figure it out one step at a time. Before Vivian could respond, a small voice called from inside the house, Mommy! They both turned to see Olivia standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes heavy with sleep. What is it, sweetheart? Vivian asked, immediately rising and going to her daughter. I had a bad dream, Olivia said, her lower lip trembling. There was a mean man trying to take us away from you and Daddy. Dominic felt a chill at the child's words, so eerily reflective of the reality that had shaped her early life. He joined Vivian, kneeling beside Olivia. That sounds scary, he said gently. But it was just a dream. No one is going to take you away from us. Olivia looked at him with solemn eyes. Promise. I promise, Dominic said firmly. I'll always protect you and your brother and sister and your mom. That's what daddies do. Olivia considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Can I have some water? Of course, Vivian said. Let's get you a drink and then back to bed. As Vivian led Olivia inside, Dominic followed, struck by how naturally they had fallen into parenting together, despite their years apart. In the kitchen, he filled a small cup with water while Vivian stroked Olivia's hair soothingly. After Olivia had been tucked back into bed, with reassurances that both her parents would be nearby all night, Dominic and Vivian found themselves alone in the hallway outside the children's room. She's the sensitive one, Vivian explained quietly, more intuitive than the others. She picks up on emotions, on tensions that Emma and Benjamin miss. She knew something was wrong between us, Dominic realized. That's what triggered the nightmare. Vivian nodded. Probably, which is why we need to be careful, Dominic. Clear about what we're doing, what we're promising to each other and to them. I meant what I said to her, Dominic said. I will protect all of you, always. Vivian's expression softened. I believe you, but protection isn't just about physical safety. It's about emotional security too. The children are already attached to you. If we try to rebuild our relationship and it doesn't work, it will work, Dominic said with quiet certainty. Not because it's easy or because we're the same people we were 6 years ago, but because we both want it to. Because we're willing to do the work. Vivian studied his face in the dim hallway light, searching for something. Whatever she saw must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly. One day at a time, she said, echoing her earlier words. Starting tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, Dominic agreed. As they parted ways to their separate rooms, Dominic felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from his life for too long. The road ahead wouldn't be simple or straight, but for the first time in 6 years, he could see a future worth building. One with Vivian and their children at its center. The next morning brought a shift in the weather, dark clouds gathering over the Gulf as a spring storm approached. The beach plans were postponed, much to the children's disappointment, until Dominic suggested building the model airplane he'd promised Benjamin. I had my assistant overnight some supplies, he explained to Vivian's raised eyebrow. They should be delivered this morning. Sure enough, a courier arrived just after breakfast with a large package containing not 1 but 3 model airplane kits. One for each child, along with all the necessary tools and materials. I thought the girls might want to build their own, Dominic explained as Benjamin's eyes widened with excitement. Emma can paint hers however she wants, and Olivia's has a special light-up feature for nighttime flying. You didn't have to do that, Vivian said, but her smile belied any real objection. I wanted to, Dominic replied simply. They cleared the dining room table, spreading out newspapers to protect the surface, and Dominic guided the children through the process of assembling their models. He was impressed by their focus and dexterity, Benjamin methodically following each step in the instructions, Emma adding creative flourishes to her design, Olivia carefully ensuring each piece was perfectly aligned. They get that from you, Vivian observed as she brought them snacks mid-morning. That ability to concentrate completely on a task. I've never had that kind of focus. You're selling yourself short, Dominic countered. I remember how you could spend hours on your garden designs, lost in the creative process. Vivian smiled, acknowledging the point. Maybe we each gave them different kinds of focus. The best of both of us? Dominic agreed, watching as Emma carefully painted her plane's wings in a rainbow pattern. The storm arrived in earnest by early afternoon, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling over the Gulf. The children, having completed their airplanes, were now engaged in an elaborate game involving their new toys and various stuffed animals as passengers. Eleanor, who had been watching the family interaction with thoughtful eyes, beckoned Dominic to join her in the kitchen while Vivian supervised the children's play. You seem determined to insert yourself back into my daughter's life, she said without preamble as she prepared tea. I'm determined to be a father to my children, Dominic corrected gently. What happens between Vivian and me is for us to decide. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, measuring tea leaves into a pot with precise movements. And what are your intentions toward my daughter, Mr. Westbrook? The formal address reminded Dominic of their first meeting, when Eleanor had made it clear she found him lacking as a potential son-in-law. Now, despite his success and wealth, her skepticism remained, though perhaps for different reasons. I love her, Dominic said simply. I never stopped loving her, and I want to build a life with her and our children, if she'll have me. Love isn't always enough, Eleanor observed, pouring hot water over the tea leaves. Especially when there's a history of pain between you. No, it isn't, Dominic agreed. But it's a starting point. The rest takes work, commitment, compromise. All things I'm prepared to offer. Eleanor studied him over the rim of her teacup. 6 years ago, I would have said you were incapable of compromise. That your ambition would always come before my daughter's happiness. And now, Dominic asked. Now I'm reserving judgment, Eleanor said, but her tone had softened slightly. Time changes people, sometimes for the better. It changed both of us, Dominic acknowledged. Vivian is stronger, more independent than she was before, and I've learned what truly matters. Eleanor nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. The children adore you already, she observed. Benjamin hasn't stopped talking about his real dad since you arrived. The girls are more cautious, but equally enchanted. They're extraordinary, Dominic said, his chest warming with pride. Vivian did an amazing job raising them. Yes, she did, Eleanor agreed, often at great personal cost. Remember that, Mr. Westbrook, when you're making plans for their future. Before Dominic could respond, a crash of thunder shook the house, followed by a momentary power outage. When the lights flickered back on, the children's excited voices called from the living room. Grandma, Daddy, come see the lightning. As they rejoined the family, Dominic found himself studying Eleanor with new understanding. Her protectiveness toward Vivian wasn't just the reflexive defense of a mother. It was born from watching her daughter struggle alone, from supporting her through the hardest years of her life. If he and Vivian were to build a future together, Eleanor would be part of that equation. A grandmother to his children, a mother-in-law he needed to respect and include. The storm raged throughout the afternoon, keeping the family indoors. They played board games, baked cookies, and watched a movie the children had seen 100 times, but it's still the best, Daddy. By evening, the triplets were pleasantly exhausted, falling asleep quickly after dinner despite the continuing thunder. With the children settled, Dominic found himself alone with Vivian in the kitchen, helping her clean up while Eleanor rested in her room, her stamina still limited by her recent stroke. You're good with them, Vivian observed as she loaded the dishwasher. Natural, like you've been doing this for years instead of days. It feels natural, Dominic admitted, wrapping leftovers to store in the refrigerator. Being with them, taking care of them. I didn't know it was possible to love someone so completely, so instantly. That's parenthood, Vivian said with a small smile. It rewires your entire being. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the domestic task feeling oddly significant. A glimpse of what everyday life together might be like. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, Vivian said finally, closing the dishwasher and turning to face him. About starting fresh somewhere new. Dominic's heart quickened. And it might be the simplest solution, she acknowledged. Neutral territory. No baggage of my life in Oregon or yours in New York. We could look at options, Dominic suggested, careful not to push too hard. Maybe somewhere with good schools, outdoor space for the kids, not too far from an airport for business travel when necessary. And my mother, Vivian added. I'd want to be within reasonable distance of her, especially after her health scare. Of course, Dominic agreed immediately. We could look at places in Florida, or perhaps North Carolina. Somewhere with seasons but not harsh winters. Vivian leaned against the counter, her expression thoughtful. You've given this some consideration. I've had a lot of time to think these past few days, Dominic admitted. About what matters, about how to make this work. It won't be simple, Vivian cautioned. Uprooting the children, starting over in a new place. And there's still so much we need to work through between us. One step at a time, Dominic reminded her. We don't have to solve everything tonight. Vivian nodded, then glanced toward the window where rain still lashed against the glass. The storm's getting worse, she observed. The weather alert said it might bring coastal flooding. As if on cue, Dominic's phone chimed with a notification. He pulled it from his pocket, frowning at the screen. What is it? Vivian asked, noticing his expression. A security alert from my home system in New York, Dominic said, opening the app. Probably just a power outage from storms up there too. But as he checked the notification, his frown deepened. That's strange. Someone tried to access my home office. The system locked down automatically. Could it be your housekeeper? Or maintenance? Vivian suggested. Not at this hour, Dominic said, scrolling through the alert details. And they all have authorized access codes. A chill ran through him as he opened the security camera footage. The image was dark, but he could make out a figure in his office, attempting to access his computer. The face wasn't visible, but something about the build, the movements. I need to make a call, he said, his voice tight. This might be important. Vivian nodded, concern evident in her expression. I'll finish up here. Dominic stepped onto the covered patio, sheltered from the rain but still able to hear the crash of waves against the shore. He dialed his head of security, a former FBI agent who oversaw Westbrook's cybersecurity and Dominic's personal protection. Mitchell, it's Westbrook. I just got an alert about an intrusion at my penthouse. I saw it too, Mitchell confirmed. I've dispatched security to check it out and alerted NYPD. The system performed as designed, full lockdown, data protection protocols engaged. Whoever it was couldn't access anything important. Can you tell who it was? Dominic asked, though a sinking feeling in his gut told him he already knew. Not yet, Mitchell said. The footage is being enhanced now. But Dominic, there's something else you should know. I've been running background on Richard Blackwood since you called about finding your wife. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. What about him? He was released from federal prison 3 weeks ago, Mitchell said grimly. Early parole for good behavior and cooperation in another case. He's supposed to be restricted to the New York area as a condition of his release, but he could have arranged for someone else to break in, Dominic finished, his mind racing. Or he could have violated parole. Exactly, Mitchell agreed. I flagged this with his parole officer, but I thought you should know. If he's involved, this might not be just about corporate espionage anymore. No, Dominic said, a cold certainty settling in his chest. It wouldn't be. Keep me updated and increase security at the office. I want everything locked down until we know what we're dealing with. As he ended the call, Dominic turned to find Vivian standing in the doorway, her face pale in the dim light. It's Blackwood, isn't it? She asked quietly. He's out. Dominic nodded, seeing no point in hiding the truth. 3 weeks ago, Mitchell thinks he might be behind the break-in at my place. Fear flashed across Vivian's face, the same fear he'd glimpsed at the airport when she first saw him. The children, she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. If he finds out about them. He won't, Dominic said firmly, crossing to her and taking her hands in his. And even if he did, I won't let him anywhere near our family. We're not alone this time, Vivian. We're together. She looked up at him, vulnerability and strength warring in her expression. I spent 6 years running from this man, Dominic. 6 years looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, teaching the children to be careful about what they shared with strangers. I know, Dominic said gently, and I'm so sorry you had to carry that burden alone. But it ends now. Whatever Blackwood is planning, we'll face it together. Vivian drew a shaky breath, visibly gathering her composure. We should check on the children, she said. Make sure they're still asleep. Together they went upstairs, finding all three triplets sleeping soundly despite the storm raging outside. Benjamin had kicked off his covers as usual, and Dominic gently tucked him back in, marveling at how natural the gesture felt after just 3 days of fatherhood. In the hallway outside the children's room, Vivian turned to him, her expression resolute. "We need a plan," she said quietly. "If Blackwood is really back, if he's targeting you again, we need to be prepared. First thing tomorrow, I'll have Mitchell arrange security for the house," Dominic said. "Discreet but effective. And we'll need to decide our next steps, whether to stay here or move somewhere more secure until we know what we're dealing with." Vivian nodded, her practical nature asserting itself through the fear. "I should tell Mom," she said. "She needs to understand the situation." "We'll talk to her together," Dominic suggested. "In the morning, when we have more information." As they stood there in the dim hallway, the storm howling outside, Dominic was struck by how quickly their tentative reconciliation had been overshadowed by the same threat that had separated them 6 years ago. But this time they faced it as a united front, older, wiser, and with far more at stake. "Try to get some rest," he told Vivian, resisting the urge to pull her into his arms. "I'll keep my phone on and Mitchell will call if there are any developments." Vivian nodded, but made no move toward her room. "Dominic," she said hesitantly, Would you mind staying with me tonight? Just to talk," she added quickly. "I don't think I can be alone with my thoughts right now." The request, so simple yet so significant, touched something deep in Dominic's heart. "Of course," he said softly. "Whatever you need." In Vivian's room, they sat on the small love seat by the window, watching the storm lash the coastline. Dominic kept a respectful distance, sensing that what Vivian needed now was his presence, not his touch. "Tell me about the children's birth," he said, hoping to distract her from darker thoughts. "If you want to." A small smile touched Vivian's lips. "It was chaotic," she admitted. "I was only 32 weeks along when my water broke. The doctor had warned me that triplets often come early, but I wasn't prepared." "Were you scared?" Dominic asked. "Terrified," Vivian confessed. "I was alone in a strange city, using a different name with no family nearby. The nurses were kind, but—" She trailed off, then continued more softly. "I kept wishing you were there, kept imagining what you would say, how excited you'd be." The admission pierced Dominic's heart. "What happened?" "Emergency C-section," Vivian said. "Benjamin came first, then Emma, then Olivia. They were so tiny, Benjamin just over 4 pounds, the girls even smaller. They spent 3 weeks in the NICU. And you were alone for all of it?" Dominic said, the reality of what she'd endured hitting him anew. Vivian nodded. "I rented a tiny apartment near the hospital so I could be with them every day. I'd sit for hours with one baby on each side and Benjamin on my chest, just talking to them, telling them they were strong, that they were loved." "You were amazing," Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. "Are amazing." "I did what any mother would do," Vivian said simply. "They needed me to be strong, so I was." They talked through the night as the storm gradually subsided, sharing stories of the years they'd spent apart, Vivian describing the children's milestones and challenges, Dominic explaining how Westbrook had grown from promising startup to industry leader. By dawn, they had filled in some of the gaps in their separate lives, building a bridge across the years of silence. As the first light of morning filtered through the windows, Dominic's phone rang. Mitchell's name flashed on the screen. "What have you got?" Dominic answered without preamble. "Confirmation," Mitchell said grimly. "It was Blackwood at your penthouse. Facial recognition from the enhanced security footage is conclusive. And there's more, he accessed your calendar before the system locked him out. He knows you're in Florida." "Dominic." A cold weight settled in Dominic's stomach. "How soon can you get a security team to our location?" "I've already dispatched them," Mitchell assured him. "ETA 3 hours. I've also alerted local law enforcement to be on the lookout for Blackwood. He's in violation of his parole by leaving New York, so they have grounds to pick him up if they spot him." "Good," Dominic said. "Keep me posted." As he ended the call, He turned to find Vivian watching him, her expression calm but resolute. "He's coming here, isn't he?" she asked. "We don't know that for certain," Dominic said, unwilling to increase her fear. "But yes, it's possible. Mitchell has security on the way, and the local police have been alerted." Vivian nodded, rising from the love seat with quiet determination. "Then we need to be ready," she said. "I'll wake Mom and explain the situation. You check on the children. We should have breakfast as normal. No need to frighten them unless absolutely necessary." Her calm efficiency in the face of danger reminded Dominic of why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Beneath Vivian's gentle exterior had always been a core of steel, a strength that had allowed her to survive 6 years on her own, protecting their children from a threat they never knew existed. "Vivian," he said, catching her hand as she moved toward the door. "Whatever happens, we face it together this time. No more sacrifices, no more running. We protect our family as a team." She squeezed his hand, her eyes meeting his with newfound resolve. "Together," she agreed. "No more running." The morning unfolded with forced normalcy. Breakfast for the children, who were excited about the puddles left by the storm and eager to return to the beach. Eleanor, after a tense private conversation with Dominic and Vivian, maintained a calm facade for the triplets' benefit while quietly helping Vivian pack essential items, just in case. By mid-morning, Mitchell's security team had arrived, 2 former military men who established a discreet perimeter around the property, while a third remained with the family inside. The children, told only that Daddy's work friends were visiting, accepted the explanation without question, though Olivia watched the men with thoughtful eyes that suggested she sensed more than she was told. "What's our plan?" Vivian asked quietly as they watched the children play a board game with Eleanor in the living room. "We can't just wait here for Blackwood to show up. Mitchell is arranging a secure location," Dominic explained. "A private property about an hour from here, isolated and with excellent security. We'll move there this afternoon, once everything is prepared." Vivian nodded, her practical nature accepting the necessity. And then we end this," Dominic said, his voice hardening. "Blackwood violated his parole by coming after me. That alone will send him back to prison. But I have more evidence I've been gathering for years about his other illegal activities, insurance in case he ever resurfaced." "You knew he might come back," Vivian realized. "I hoped he wouldn't," Dominic admitted. "But yes, I prepared for the possibility. What I never imagined was finding you and the children in the middle of it." Before Vivian could respond, one of the security men approached, his expression grave. "Mr. Westbrook, we have a situation. A car just parked at the public beach access point down the road. The driver matches Blackwood's description." Dominic felt Vivian tense beside him. "How long do we have?" "Minutes if he's heading this way," the security man said. "We should move your family now, sir." Dominic nodded, turning to Vivian. "Get the children and your mother ready. Just tell them we're going for a drive to see a special place. Nothing alarming." As Vivian moved swiftly to gather the family, Dominic pulled out his phone to call Mitchell, only to find the signal suddenly gone. "He's jamming our communications," he realized, showing the security man his phone. "Blackwood was always thorough." "We have radio backup," the man assured him, touching his earpiece. "Team is in position outside. We'll get you safely to the vehicles." Within minutes, the family was ready, the children excited about the surprise outing, Eleanor moving as quickly as her recovery allowed, Vivian maintaining a calm demeanor that belied the fear Dominic knew she must be feeling. "We'll take 2 cars," the security lead explained. "Mr. Westbrook, you and the children in the SUV with me. Ms. Winters and her mother in the sedan with my colleague." "No," Vivian said firmly. "We stay together. All of us in one vehicle." The security man began to protest, but Dominic cut him off. "She's right. We don't separate." They were moving toward the front door when Benjamin suddenly stopped. "My airplane," he exclaimed. "I left it upstairs. I need it for the trip." "Sweetheart, we can get it later," Vivian said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "But Daddy and I built it together." Benjamin insisted, his lower lip trembling. It's special. Dominic knelt to his son's level. Tell you what, buddy. I'll go get it for you right now, and meet you at the car. Okay? Benjamin nodded, satisfied with the solution. It's on my nightstand. The blue one with the silver wings. I know exactly which one, Dominic assured him, ruffling his hair. To Vivian, he added quietly, Get them to the car. I'll be right behind you. Vivian hesitated, clearly torn between keeping the family together and honoring their son's request. Be quick, she finally said. Dominic raced upstairs, located the model airplane, and was heading back down when he heard the front door open. Assuming the family was already outside, he hurried toward the entryway, only to find himself face to face with Richard Blackwood. 6 years had changed his former partner. Prison had hardened him, leached away whatever charm he'd once possessed. His once stylish appearance had given way to a leaner, more predatory look. But his eyes were the same, calculating, cold, fixed now on Dominic with undisguised hatred. Hello, Dominic, Blackwood said, his voice eerily calm. Imagine my surprise when I discovered your wife isn't as dead as everyone believed. Dominic's mind raced, calculating the family's position, hopefully in the car by now. The security team's location, outside, unaware that Blackwood had somehow entered through the back, and his own options, limited, with Blackwood blocking the front door. This ends now, Richard, Dominic said, keeping his voice steady. The police are already on their way. You're violating your parole just being here. Blackwood smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Parole violations are the least of my concerns. You took everything from me, Dominic. My company, my reputation, my freedom. 6 years in federal prison gives a man plenty of time to plan his response. You did that to yourself? Dominic countered, subtly shifting his position to keep Blackwood's attention on him, rather than the sounds of the family potentially still in the house. You tried to steal my algorithm, my life's work. It should have been ours, Blackwood hissed, his composure cracking slightly. We built Westbrook together. But you got greedy, wanted all the glory for yourself. That's not what happened and you know it, Dominic said, his mind working furiously to find a way out of this confrontation without endangering his family. You wanted to sell our technology to the highest bidder. I wanted to use it to help people. Blackwood laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Always the noble visionary. Tell me, did your wife appreciate your noble vision when she fled with your unborn child? Or did she finally see you for the self-righteous hypocrite you really are? The taunt struck a nerve, but Dominic kept his expression neutral. What do you want, Richard? You can't possibly think you'll get away with whatever you're planning. What I want, Blackwood said, taking a step closer, is for you to feel what I felt, to lose everything you value, starting with your miraculous family reunion. A chill ran through Dominic at the threat. They have nothing to do with this. On the contrary, Blackwood said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They have everything to do with it. Your wife was supposed to convince you to sign over the algorithm to me. Instead, she ran. And now, after all these years, you found each other again. How touching. His expression hardened. How perfect. Dominic was about to respond when he caught a flicker of movement behind Blackwood. Vivian, silently entering through the kitchen door, her eyes wide but her movements deliberate. She held her phone in her hand, clearly recording the confrontation. Understanding flashed between them in an instant. The wordless communication of two people who, despite years apart, still knew each other's minds. Dominic needed to keep Blackwood talking, getting him to incriminate himself further. You won't touch my family, Dominic said, his voice rising slightly to cover any sound Vivian might make. Whatever grievance you have is with me, not them. Your family is your vulnerability, Blackwood said, oblivious to Vivian's approach. Always has been. Why do you think I targeted your wife 6 years ago? I knew she was your weakness. And yet she outsmarted you, Dominic said, unable to keep a hint of pride from his voice. She protected our children from you for 6 years. Blackwood's face darkened with anger. A temporary setback. But now, he never finished the sentence. The security alarm suddenly blared throughout the house. Vivian had triggered the panic button on the system. Blackwood whirled around, startled by both the noise and Vivian's unexpected presence. "It's over, Blackwood," Vivian said firmly, holding up her phone. "I've recorded everything. Your threats, your admission about 6 years ago, all of it. The security team is already surrounding the house." Blackwood lunged toward her, but Dominic intercepted him, restraining him until the security team burst in moments later, alerted by the alarm. They secured Blackwood, binding his hands with zip ties. "The children?" Dominic asked urgently. "Safe in the car with Mom and the rest of the security team," Vivian assured him, her voice remarkably steady. "I came back when I realized you might be in danger." Dominic crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. "That was incredibly brave," he said, his heart still racing. "And incredibly smart. I wasn't going to lose you again," Vivian said simply, her arms tightening around him. "Not to him. Not after everything." "Police are 3 minutes out," one of the security team confirmed. "Get him out of here," Dominic instructed. "I don't want the children to see him when we leave." As the security men escorted the struggling Blackwood to a separate area, Dominic turned back to Vivian, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Are you okay?" She nodded, the adrenaline beginning to fade from her expression. "I think so. It happened so fast. I didn't really think. I just acted." "You saved me," Dominic said softly. Again, a small, shaky smile touched Vivian's lips. "We saved each other. That's what partners do." The word partners hung between them, weighted with meaning and possibility. Before Dominic could respond, the wail of police sirens filled the air. "We should go," Vivian said. "The children will be getting anxious." Together they walked out to the waiting SUV, where 3 worried little faces pressed against the windows. Benjamin's expression brightened when he spotted the model airplane still clutched in Dominic's hand. "You got it!" he exclaimed as they climbed into the vehicle. "I promised, didn't I?" Dominic said, handing over the precious toy. "And I always keep my promises." His eyes met Vivian's over their son's head, the double meaning clear between them. "Always." The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements, security arrangements, and careful explanations to the children about why they needed to stay at a different house for a few days. By evening, they were settled in the secure property Mitchell had arranged, a spacious lakeside home with state-of-the-art security systems and a team of professionals ensuring their safety. The children, resilient as always, had turned the unexpected move into an adventure, exploring the new house with enthusiasm and declaring the bunk beds in their room the coolest ever. Eleanor, though clearly shaken by the day's events, maintained a calm presence for her grandchildren's sake, reading them stories until they finally succumbed to sleep. Now, with the house quiet and security in place, Dominic and Vivian sat on the back deck overlooking the lake, the events of the day settling around them like the night air. "Blackwood will go back to prison," Dominic said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Mitchell says the parole violation alone would send him back, but with the breaking and entering, the threats, the signal jamming, he's looking at significant additional time." "Good," Vivian said simply. "The children will be safe." "We all will be," Dominic assured her, reaching for her hand across the space between their chairs. "It's over, Vivian. Really over this time." She intertwined her fingers with his, her expression thoughtful in the dim light. "It doesn't feel quite real yet," she admitted. "After 6 years of looking over my shoulder, of teaching the children to be careful about strangers, of never staying in one place too long, it's hard to believe we can just live now." "We can," Dominic said softly. "However we choose to." Vivian turned to face him fully, her expression open and vulnerable in a way it hadn't been since their reunion. "I've been thinking about what happens next," she said. "About us, about the children, about where we go from here." Dominic's heart quickened, but he kept his voice steady. "And what have you decided?" "That I want to try," Vivian said simply. "Not to recapture what we had before, we're different people now, but to build something new, something stronger. For the children, yes, but also for us. Joy bloomed in Dominic's chest, warm and expansive. I want that too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than anything. It won't be easy, Vivian cautioned, ever the practical one. We have a lot to figure out. Where to live, how to blend our separate lives, how to be partners again after so much time apart. One day at a time, Dominic reminded her, echoing her earlier words. We don't have to solve everything tonight. A smile touched Vivian's lips, genuine and unguarded. No, she agreed. Not tonight. She rose from her chair, still holding his hand, and moved to stand before him. In the moonlight filtering through the trees, she looked both familiar and new. His Vivian, but stronger, more certain of herself and what she wanted. Tonight, she said softly, I just want to be with you, to start remembering what it feels like to be us. Dominic stood, drawing her gently into his arms. I never forgot, he murmured, his lips close to her ear. Not for a single day. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a rediscovery rather than a reclaiming. But as Vivian's arms slid around his neck, as Dominic's hands found their familiar place at the small of her back, the years between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a connection that had never truly broken, only stretched across time and distance. When they finally parted, Vivian rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. I missed you, she whispered. Even when I was angry, even when I was afraid, I missed you every day. I'm here now, Dominic promised, and I'm not going anywhere. Sisters, what lengths would you go to protect your family? Double tap if you'd move mountains to keep them safe. 6 months later, Dominic stood on the deck of a different house. Their house. Watching as Benjamin and his sisters raced across the expansive backyard, their laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. The property, nestled in the rolling hills of North Carolina, had been a compromise, close enough to Florida for regular visits to Eleanor, equipped with a state-of-the-art home office for Dominic's work with Westbrook, and with ample space for Vivian's growing landscape design business. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been difficult conversations, compromises, moments of frustration as they navigated their new reality. The children had struggled initially with leaving their friends in Oregon, though they'd adapted quickly to their new school and the excitement of having both parents under one roof. Vivian joined him at the railing, slipping her arm around his waist. Penny for your thoughts, she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. Just thinking about how much has changed in 6 months, Dominic replied, drawing her closer. How lucky we are. Luck had nothing to do with it, Vivian countered with a smile. We worked for this. We're still working for it every day. She was right, of course. Their relationship now was both familiar and entirely new, built on a foundation of shared history but strengthened by the people they'd become during their years apart. Dominic had learned to balance work with family, to be present in ways he never had before. Vivian had maintained her independence while opening herself to partnership again, trusting Dominic with her heart after years of self-reliance. The children seem happy, Dominic observed, watching as they constructed an elaborate leaf pile with the same focus they brought to their model airplanes. They are, Vivian agreed. Benjamin asked me yesterday if this was our forever home. I think he's finally believing that this is real, that we're a family together. And you? Dominic asked, turning to face her fully. Are you happy, Vivian? Her eyes met his, clear and certain. Yes, she said simply. Happier than I thought possible again. The honesty in her voice warmed him from within. They had come so far from that chance encounter at JFK, from the shock and pain and tentative hope of their reunion to this solid, purposeful life they were building together. I have something for you, Dominic said, reaching into his pocket. I've been waiting for the right moment. He withdrew a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring. Not the elaborate diamond he'd given her when they first married, but a simpler design, a sapphire surrounded by smaller stones that caught the afternoon light. It's not an engagement ring, he explained as Vivian's eyes widened. We're already married, at least legally, but I thought, maybe it could be a new beginning ring. A symbol of the life we're building now, not the one we had before. Tears gathered in Vivian's eyes as she took the box from him. It's beautiful, she said softly. Like our second chance, Dominic said. Unexpected, precious, and completely worth the wait. Vivian slipped the ring onto her finger. A perfect fit, as he'd known it would be. I love you, she said. The words still new enough between them to carry special weight. Not just for who you were or who you are now, but for who we are together. As Dominic drew her into his arms, sealing their renewed commitment with a kiss, he was acutely aware of how close they had come to missing this. How many twists of fate had been required to bring them back to each other. The airport encounter that could so easily not have happened. The week in Florida that could have ended differently. The confrontation with Blackwood that might have torn them apart again instead of cementing their bond. Daddy, Mommy, come see our Leaf Mountain, Benjamin called from the yard, breaking the moment. Hand in hand, they descended the steps to join their children, these miraculous beings who had brought them back together against all odds. As they helped add leaves to the impressive pile, as the twins demonstrated their jumping technique and Benjamin explained the structural engineering principles behind their creation, Dominic felt a contentment he had never known in his years of professional success. This was what mattered. These small moments, this family they had nearly lost and fought so hard to reclaim. Not the corporate acquisitions or the technological breakthroughs or the billions in his bank account, but the sound of his children's laughter and the warmth of Vivian's hand in his. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Dominic and Vivian sat before the fireplace in their new home, planning a Thanksgiving visit to Eleanor in Florida. The children are so excited to show Grandma their new school projects, Vivian said, curled against Dominic's side. And Mom seems better each time we video chat. The physical therapy is really helping. We could look at properties down there, Dominic suggested. A vacation home for winter breaks, close to your mother. The children would love having a beach place. Vivian smiled up at him. Always planning for the future, she observed. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't, Dominic replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. But I'm learning to enjoy the present too. As the fire crackled and the autumn wind rustled the trees outside, Dominic reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain and loss, the years of separation, the chance reunion that had changed everything. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and marked by mistakes on both sides. But it was theirs, and they had fought for their second chance with everything they had. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the time they had lost, but the future they were building together, one day at a time. My beautiful queens, if this story touched your heart, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories of resilience, second chances, and the power of true love. Remember that sometimes the most difficult journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be, and that it's never too late to find your way back home.